Hello and welcome to this edition of Dr. Clark Reports. I'm your host, Dr. Gary Clark, and my guest is the president of Dillard University, my friend, Dr. Walter Kimbrough. Dr. Kimbrough, greetings and welcome, my friend.
All right, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, yes, and you're the new president, Dr. Kimbrough of Dillard University, and you've been here since July of this year, and you know, you hit the ground running. And yes, sir, tell us about the structure of the university now under your leadership and how you intend to move the university, please.
Right. Well, you know, I started, I moved in town middle of June, so I could start the 1st of July. And it was really good because the way that the process was done, I was selected in November. So I've had 6 months to really start to get to know the institution and learn some things in terms of how we're organized and what we need to do. So it made it easier for me to come in and start working versus my last presidency. I was selected in October, I moved 2 months later and I was working. So I mean, that made it really difficult. So this has been an opportunity to really come in and start meeting with all the people on the ground. And so one of the things that I did, which I'm about to work on a book with a professor at Penn about HBCUs. I'm gonna recommend to HBCU presidents and pretty much any small college president, you gotta talk to the people on the ground to sort of see what is working. What are we doing well? What are some of the inefficiencies? And so having some of that right now, I'm able to start to see, okay, how do we set up a structure that I think is going to be flatter, that's more engaged? And I try to lead by that example too. So people have access to me and they don't have to go through multiple layers. Because I mean, we have about 300 employees, so it shouldn't be 5 layers between me and someone who is on our custodial staff. They should be able to have some access, you know? And so I'm trying to create a culture where there's access and accountability all throughout the organization, that more people buy into it, so it's not just a certain group. But if you get buy-in all across the organization, you're gonna make a lot of things happen, I think, quickly. And so that's the philosophy that I'm working through right now and trying to start to set it up so that we can be efficient, be effective, be much more responsive to changes in the economy and things that are happening nationally. Because one of the things that higher education, I think, is criticized about is that because of our structure, we're slow to move. And I've heard somebody say the old adage is it's easier to change the course of history than it is to change a history course, because we have a lot of bureaucracy in higher ed. So we're going to try to figure out how do we become nimble and address the issues in our community, I think, quicker.
Yes, now, you know, one issue and one question, period, is that individuals always would like to know the temperament of leadership. Yeah. And, you know, when we go places and we whether it's corporate America, wherever it may be in the private sector, and you want to know about the nature, the temperament of that person at the top. How would you describe your temperament?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think really would be a good question that we start asking anyone who is in leadership. That would be a great interview question. I would have to remember that one. I really enjoy what I do, and I start from the premise that life is short and you need to enjoy what you do. And so I think the key to life, and the late author Elan Harris, who is a native of Arkansas, I met him in Virginia maybe 10, 15 years ago. He said, look, the key to life is to find something that you love doing that you would do for free and find a way to get paid to do it. And so for me, I love what I do. And when you love what you do and there is a passion about what you do and you're committed, that sort of impacts how you lead, I think. So I start from that premise. It's not just a job that I need to have. It's something that I'm really passionate about. So, you know, I'm very creative. I like to take risks. I like for us to do things that we haven't done before. And it's not, you know, a person says, well, you messed up and now you have to go. It's like, okay, you messed up. How do you fix it? You know, that's you know, so I like that creative environment. I like to have a good time. I really enjoy what I do, and I like being, because you spend most of your time, and if you're a president, you're thinking about your job 24/7. So you got to really enjoy it. So I mean, I have a good time at work. I like to be creative. I like to be cutting edge. I like to look around and scan the environment and say, okay, where are the opportunities for us, and who's doing what, and how can we mirror that? How can we take advantage of that? So I mean, I like people to be engaged and enjoy what they do. And so I try to mirror that in terms of my leadership, that, you know, I'm passionate about what I do, I'm engaged, I'm creative, and that's sort of how I live. It's sort of like being, you know, a basketball analogy, it's sort of what Magic Johnson did. Magic Johnson was a coach on the court. He was playing the game, so he's not just a coach on the sideline, he's actually still playing the game. So I'm in the game with everybody else and I have a role to play, but I'm supposed to run the offense. I'm the point guard. And so that's how I look at my leadership style.
Right, and that works quite quite well. Now, you know, Dillard University sits right there in Gentilly, and how do you see Dillard in Gentilly and in the New Orleans proper?
Yeah,
and actually in our nation, but how do you see Dillard spreading?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that we've got to be, historically, Dillard has been an anchor institution for that community. There's a book by Robert Franklin, the president of Morehouse College, that talks about, you know, African-American communities. And he talks about these three anchor institutions: the schools, particularly colleges and universities, families, and the church. And so Dillard is an anchor institution in that community. And so a lot of things that we do need to reach out into that community. Some are going to be programmatic, some are going to be advocacy pieces. So for example, for me, when I'm looking at the slow response in the wake of the hurricane to getting power to the Gentilly community, I'm trying to use the power of social media via Twitter to let the people from, you know, NOLA Ready and Entergy know, hey, I'm in this community that most of the power is out. So I wanted to keep that, you know, publicly, keep that on their radar, and they start to respond back to me to say, yeah, we know about this, we're on this. So that's a part of what I can do as president of Dillard in that anchor community institution, to say, look at everybody else in our community as well. So I think that it's advocacy for people in the community. I think it's programmatic. I think it's cultural, that we provide opportunities for people in that community to come and experience cultural. And that's historic Dillard. Yes. I mean, I talked to a lot of people.
Precisely.
Dillard has always done that. So I want to make sure we're involved in bringing culture and education to that community. I think that's our role.
Well, you know, and there is something I know that's very important about the nature of the student. It's the student, him or herself.
Yeah.
The prototypical student that you want at Dillard is what?
Yeah,
and is there a prototypical? Because we know how schools have their.
Yeah, it's, you know, that's I was talking to some professors as a part of, you know, sort of my background research and meeting with people. I think Dillard, like a lot of HBCUs, and Dillard probably more so, has had really two distinct kinds of students. It's not your typical bell curve. It's sort of inverse, where you always have a lot of superstars that come here because there is an academic reputation. There are some that need some additional assistance as well, and I think that's a part of our mission as well. You know, we can just get all the superstars and you make it easy. It's sort of like Harvard. People keep saying, well, Harvard is the best institution in the country. I'm like, how do you know? You walk in with students who are perfect SAT and ACT scores. Do you really have to teach them? You know, if Harvard wants to impress me, I want them to go get Pookie from the lower ninth and teach them, somebody who graduates who's reading at the 8th grade level, and get them up to speed in 4 years. If Harvard is the best, they can get Pookie out of the lower ninth.
Precisely.
And get him there. So I'm not convinced. I don't buy into that. Okay, I've never bought into that. So I think that we can educate a wide range of students, and I think that's been the history of Dillard. So we want to do that. They're going to be some that we want that are the superstars that can go wherever they want to in the country. We want some of those students as well, because particularly if we educate them properly, they can become mentors and role models to their peers who don't come from the same backgrounds, and those peers can aspire to those other students. So then we have a community that's educating the students that might need a little additional assistance. Now they're going to need some basic, bring some basic skills to the table, which is another role of the institution. And we've got to advocate, and we've got to be involved in the K through 12 situation. Because I've already started having conversations. I'm going to meet with the superintendent of the Recovery School District. We got to talk about it because it's a crisis to me.
Precisely.
And we've got to make sure that, you know, those students have an opportunity not only to come to college, but to be successful. So we got to advocate in that role too.
Well, you know, that's been one issue in the New Orleans area, is that there are great universities here.
Yeah.
But strangely, we have immense difficulty with the K through 12 grades.
Yeah.
But yet, in the midst of all these fine institutions and great universities, yet you have the feeder schools have difficulty.
Right.
And to explain that is very is interesting. But you know, we talk about the prototypical student, your staff and professors. Mm-hmm. What do you see in them under your leadership?
Well, I can tell you, and I was talking to I was meeting with a professor yesterday, and we were talking about this. The thing that has stood out for me, particularly with the faculty members, is that the number of faculty that I've met with who have, without prodding, talked about the research that they're engaged in, the grant writing. It just sort of it stood out to me because everyone was saying, I'm involved in this or this, or I know I slipped up a little bit last year, I need to pick up on this. So they're really interested in, and Dillard fundamentally is more of a teaching institution, but you're seeing a great balance of professors who understand the teaching and the research and how they link together to provide the best educational situation for students. You don't get that at a major research institution because you have faculty members at institutions like that only do research. They don't see any students.
None whatsoever.
None. So, and in a lot of teaching institutions, people say, well, I just teach. I don't need to do any research. So I'm seeing here so far this perfect marriage of the research and the teaching. And so it's creating, I think, and I've got to now go into some classrooms to see it all together. I'm seeing that we have what's in place that's going to create a true educational system for our students. So that makes me really excited. I think you got a lot of dedicated and committed staff people as well. The thing I want to do with all of our faculty and staff is get us to, let's take more risks, let's do some different things, and let's be creative. So I want to push that envelope a little bit. But just in terms of the raw talent, we got talent.
It exists. When you go into the community and when you go around the country, and I know they say, hey, Dr. Kimbrough, you're in New Orleans. You're at Dillard University. Yeah. What do you say to your colleagues around the country and to those individuals who may say you're in a difficult position?
Oh no,
or you're in a wonderful place to be. What do you say to bring them here?
Oh, yes. For me, this is, I was reading, I'm trying to think, it was Diverse Issues in Higher Education, and on the cover was Melissa Harris Perry at Tulane, and she was just talking about how, New Orleans is ground zero for social justice. And I think Time magazine listed New Orleans as the #1 brain magnet. So you got smart people all across the country that want to be here. Anybody with a cause wants to be here because there's a lot of work to deal with. I mean, you can talk about education, you can talk about crime. There are community-based issues.
Housing.
Right. Oh, yes. Everything. I mean, so for me, this is a good place to be, and not just because the institution is here and it's a great institution, but then I can figure out ways, how do I want to be involved in a major American city addressing one of these major issues? I've already talked to the mayor about the crime piece, and I was like, look, let me know what you need me to do, because I'm really interested, particularly when I got young black men killing young black men at unprecedented rates. So I want to be involved in that. I definitely got to be involved in the education piece because we're in education. So, I think I think people want to be in a place like this.
Right.
I do. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, so it was easy for me. I was excited to be in a city like this with so much potential, and there are great challenges here. But I mean, you could go somewhere and not have to deal with any challenges, but to me, that's not fun.
Well, you see, I guess I'm somewhat guilty of asking that question because it was a somewhat baited question in the sense that you are the new Orleans.
Yeah.
It's young individuals, young intellectuals, young producers, young folks who are coming into our community, and you represent the new frontier.
Yeah.
And I think we need to. This is something which is being recognized around our community, and so you're the next generation that's going to carry the torch in this community. Dillard for a long time has had a historical past of political participation and great civic engagement, and I know you care about many social issues and civic issues. Are there any specific issues that you want to put at the forefront in terms of programmatic experience?
Yeah, as a part of a process over the next couple of years, hopefully that will come out. Like I said, for me, two that stand out for me personally that I know I'll be involved in either as individual citizen or as president of Dillard University is the murder rate. And it's happening all over. I mean, you keep hearing about what's happening in Chicago, and I mean, in multiple weekends, there are double-digit people getting shot. So, I mean, we got to deal with that, and we got to deal with education. And I think education...
It keeps coming right back to education.
It comes back to education. And part of that, for me, has become sort of personal because when you move here and you got a child who just started the first grade, who after kindergarten was reading at the 4th grade level, and you want to do public school, but they assign you to a public school that has an F rating, and they realize that you have options, and they send you a list of 6 options, and the highest rating of any of those 6 options is a D. That's an issue, and it's more of an issue for me because I know I have the money to pay for my child to go to private school. What about everybody else?
Precisely, and that it has been a big dilemma. There are some CAOs and other individuals who say that when they hire someone and bring them to Louisiana and to South Louisiana, they know additionally they have to put $15,000 on the top of their salary.
That's right,
to pay for their children. Right. So that's an automatic to put them into private and parochial schools, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Whereas in other parts of the country, it's the inverse. The private schools are not necessarily the better schools or places where you want to be.
Right.
But the situation here is that is the way it resides.
Exactly.
And again, I would like to remind my viewing audience that I'm Gary Clark, and I'm speaking with the president of Dillard University, Dr. Walter Kimbrough. And Dr. Kimbrough, yes, you're my president and my leader, and my friend, but will you also tell the community the Walter Kimbrough story?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm a preacher's kid, so that addresses a lot. My dad is originally from Atlanta. My mom is from California, but they met in seminary. My mom was getting a master's in Christian education, so they were in seminary at the Interdenominational Theological Center, HBCU in Atlanta. So they got married. My dad took a couple churches in Chicago. They were there for a few years. My brother and I were born in Chicago, but we grew up in Atlanta. My mom, she ended up teaching at Clark Atlanta University in religion and philosophy, but she spent most of her career in a corporate career doing computer software sales. So that was her background. But went to public schools in Atlanta public school system, Benjamin Mays High School, which is still, I think, the best high school in Atlanta.
And a good band.
Yeah, so I mean, Mays High School. I'm a part of a generation that my dad went to Morris Brown College, my mom went to Berkeley. And so I was a part of a generation that I think HBCUs forgot about. I think we went through a period of time where we sort of expected everybody to go to HBCUs, and they didn't, and we didn't recruit them. So for me, graduating from my high school, #2 in the class, student body president, and when I meet people now that hear from Atlanta, they always say, you went to Morehouse. I mean, I fit the Morehouse profile. I keep telling the Morehouse people I need a degree because I get so much. I was talking to Spike Lee about 2 weeks ago. He like, did you go to Morehouse? That's the first thing that people ask me. Morehouse did not recruit me. It doesn't make sense. So I went to the University of Georgia because they recruited me. Cornell University named me a Cornell University National Merit Scholar. I mean, I'm one of the top students for an Ivy League institution. I can't get the HBCUs to recruit me.
And you're there in the mecca of black education.
Right, I'm right there.
Outside of Howard,
I'm 20 minutes away from there. I grew up 20 minutes from the AUC.
Yes.
20 minutes. And so went to Georgia, thought I was going to be a veterinarian, got into vet school, realized, no, I'm not going to be a veterinarian. And the president of Alcorn State University, an HBCU in Mississippi, we were having a conversation. I said, Dr. Washington, I think I might want to be a college president. What should I do? He sort of laid out this path for me. And that's how I sort of got on this path and said, I'm going to be a president based on what the president of Alcorn told me. And so that was just really good advice. So I started working in higher education and student affairs and student activities and residence life, and became a chief student affairs officer at Albany State University in Georgia, which is a residential HBCU about 2.5 hours south of Atlanta. And then I had a chance to be president at Philander Smith in Little Rock. So I was there 7.5 years.
Well, you were the youngest president in the country.
Yeah, I was one. Yeah, I was probably like maybe 30 presidents in the country that were my age or younger. So I was a very select group. And I just told the board that was sort of revolutionary for them to sort of pick this young guy because people had gotten conservative and they were really going much older with presidents. So they picked someone who was 37. But what has happened since that time is that the number of young HBCU presidents has like skyrocketed now. I mean, there got to be about 7 or 8 that are younger than me, and I'm still one of the younger ones. So I mean, I had a good experience there, and a lot of the ideas that I use here. I went to a place at Philander. Philander was not on anybody's map. Nobody know about Philander. People don't really know about Arkansas except for Bill Clinton. I mean,
right. And I went to high school in Arkansas.
Okay.
Parochial school, but Ozark Mountains. Yes.
Yeah, so people don't know a lot about it, but we were able to go there and do a lot of things and get people to start noticing what was happening at that institution. So that was a really good experience, the foundation for my work as a president. And then this opportunity came, and getting in the process and learning more about it, I was like, I think I'm supposed to be here. And so it's been just an excellent position.
But along the way, you got the mantra as the hip hop president.
Right.
How did that come about?
Well, it was, when I was introduced as president at Philander, I gave my little introduction 10-minute speech or whatever, and I said, look, I'm not like every other president. The average age at the time was 60. I was 37. I said, so I can't try to be like every other president. I said, I'm from a different generation. I'm from Generation X, And there are a lot of negative things said about Generation X. I said, but black people in Generation X are also part of what's known as the hip-hop generation. Well, there was a local newspaper that had this article, the hip-hop president, and so I didn't even come up with it. They said the hip-hop president. And so the media people at Philander said, oh, we hate this is horrible. I was like, no, wait a minute. This is brilliant, actually. And so I just ran with it.
Yes.
And so it became a way to sort of brand myself, and in terms of how I operate very differently. There was an article in Huffington Post that just came out recently that talks about HBCU presidents using social media. And there are like maybe 12 that use Facebook and 13 on Twitter. And most of the article is about me because I do it more than anybody else, and it's shown people how do you use social media to get your message out, how to engage your students, how to engage the media. So that's a part of being a part of the hip-hop generation. I'm using the technology to not only educate, but then to promote the institution. So if I know I got 5,000 people following me on Twitter, every time I say something about Dillard, which is just about every day, Dillard now, and I have a lot of major newspaper people following me. Roland Martin follows me. So Roland Martin gets to hear every day about Dillard University. That's
an
powerful.
imperative, precisely.
Right, that's powerful. I mean, particularly small institutions that don't have massive marketing budgets, this levels the playing field because now I'm on the same playing field with anybody in the city, anybody in the state with social media. And I got more followers than any president, black or white, in the state of Louisiana. So I'm on an equal footing with everybody.
And that makes a difference. The Twitter, the Instagram, all of that, to be able to reach this generation.
Right.
But this is the generation now that is coming to college and they're coming to universities where their textbooks are digital.
Yep. That's right. Yeah,
and so we have to know how to address this group of individuals.
Exactly.
Now, you've had individuals who influence you along the way. What university presidents or individuals, period, who influenced you along the way in two levels, personally and professionally?
Okay. Oh, wow. That's personally, I definitely start with my parents. Fortunate to grow up in a household with both of my parents. I learned different things from my mom, Phi Beta Kappa at Berkeley with a major in chemistry and math. So you know who the brilliant person is in our family. Okay, it's not even close. I mean, you're at Berkeley, and particularly in the 50s when there are a handful of black people there to be Phi Beta Kappa and all these other things. I mean, she's just brilliant. So, you hope you get some of that from her. She does a lot of things well. Music, I mean, her and her sister, and my mom's niece. My mom's niece plays with the San Francisco Symphony. Her sister taught music at schools and has recorded. So they all are musical. They all play. My dad's a minister, so a lot of that in terms of speaking, I got to see him every day, and particularly in terms of his engagement in the community. So in Atlanta, you're watching somebody who is connected with everybody. Anybody who ran for governor in Georgia, they came to Cascade United Methodist. It was like one of the stops. You got to go and see him. So, I mean, I saw how he could use that leverage of a church to say, how do we make things better in this community? And so I think a lot of my, notion of, community, and I've heard people describe Dr. Cook, former president of Dillard, like this sort of pastoral quality. So hopefully I'll keep growing into that like my dad, and I watch how he engaged people and, how you meet people and help them where they are and form relationships. So personally, those two would be, at the height for me. In terms of presidents, as I said, Walter Washington at Alcorn, Jim Cook, who was president of Old Dominion when I got to Old Dominion, was an influence on me. He was a person, I was a director of student activities, and he sat down and went to lunch with me and talked about, being a president. Portia Shields, who was president of Albany State, is now interim at Tennessee State. She's a person who hired me from Old Dominion, and she said, look, if you come work for me in 3 to 5 years, you will be a president. And 5 years later, I was a president.
Absolutely.
So she just laid it out. She was like, and she pushed me because I was vice president for student affairs, but she made sure I had experiences in academic affairs and advancement. And if there was something I didn't want to do, and we had a strange relationship because she thought she was my mom too. So we would have like mother-son arguments about things. But she would always say, look, do you want to be a president? And that's all I had to, then I had to sit back, and then so I think she got over on me and made me do things I didn't want to do because she was like, you need to learn how to do this, and you need to learn how to do this. So, I mean, people like that. And then, engaging with people like Dr. Francis, through UNCF. I mean, this person has been a college president almost as long as I have been alive. The longest serving college university president in the nation. And just sort of sitting down with him and you're listening to the historical perspective, I just sit there and I was like, first of all, I was like, I don't think I want to be a president that long, but to just listen to how he can pull all that stuff together, I tell people he's a rock star to me.
Well, you know what I like about you and Dr. Francis, and I've had the ability, the privilege actually working under both of you, is that both of you came from the student side of the equation.
Yeah.
And the student side of the equation in the university life, you bring a certain sensitivity that's student-centered,
Right.
and then from there, everything else blossoms.
Right. No, I think, you know, I think that's very important too. And you want to be engaged. I mean, you know, I take my scholarship seriously. Most of my work is with African American men. I've published in fraternities and sororities. I've been an expert witness in hazing cases. So I like to have my scholarship. That's important to me too. Like I said, I'm working on a book about HBCUs now with a professor at Penn. So I think that's important, to be engaged in the scholarly activities just like other faculty members. So you want to have that connection too. But there is a sensitivity when you come from that student side.
Now, you tell the story, and I like that, about Ebony Magazine and the most influential individuals. Right. Tell my viewers about that.
Well, you know, every year Ebony Magazine does this Power 100, and you know, in the past they would pick, you know, normally people who were elected officials and presidents of major, large organizations. A couple years ago, they changed up the formula to look at a wider range of people who were influencing people. So December of, I guess this was 2010, November 2010, I got a note on Facebook. Someone's like, "Congratulations for being an Ebony and the most influential." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm familiar with it because every year when I was at Philander, I would look through it and say, "Oh, I'm going to invite this person for my lecture series." That's how I found people for my lecture series. And so I called my mom because I wasn't subscribing at the time, and I was like, "Am I Ebony?" She was like, "Oh yeah, I was going to tell you about that later." I was like, "No, for real, this is like huge. Just like, this is the Ebony. These are the 100 most influential African Americans in the country. Tyler Perry and Michael Jordan, and I mean all these, Deborah Lee and the President Obama, Mrs. Obama. How am I on this list?" So that was just a great honor. It was just strange to me.
And we have about 2 minutes remaining. Now you believe in I've got to address this because you believe in social justice.
Yes, sir.
And within that 2 minutes, tell us about your approach towards social justice and how you want to carry Dillard along with that process.
Well, essentially, you know, people like Glenn Beck try to demonize social justice, but social justice really is an understanding that there are inequalities that exist in our society, and we need to be trained to understand those inequalities and create systems to address those inequalities. I mean, we're seeing the inequalities even in the aftermath of Isaac, that some people get power faster than others. There's different response time. I mean, we just got to call it for what it is. And so I think as an institution, Dillard University, and everything we have to do, we have to train our students to be aware of those inequalities that exist, but then how do they go out in their respective communities and be engaged? And it could be on a basic level. Going to PTA and being involved in your child's school can be justice, not only for your child, but for some child whose mama is not there, that you can then become an advocate for that child and their needs. And people don't look at it like that. They feel like, I got to go out and march and do that. No, you go to PTA when you know most of the parents don't go, and you speak for those parents. That is social justice too. So I want our students to be engaged as an institution, everybody to be engaged in addressing those issues in our community.
And you know, I've heard you say the major theme throughout your analysis and throughout your presentation is advocacy.
Yes, oh, definitely.
Yes, and that's what I always say. You have to have an advocate in our society, and you believe in that.
Right, exactly.
Because where you are, regardless of where you may be, whether you are in whether you are in jail, incarcerated, whatever it may be, you need to have that. But I want to thank you for joining me. It's been absolutely a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
And I want to thank my viewing audience for tuning in. And as always, it's been a pleasure.